Why do we also know that the Hyksos must be Semites? We can see that, for example, on the architecture. For example, they built the sacred district of Tel El Daba. This doesn't exist anymore. It is just in the reports that we find in the ruins. This was a bent axis temple for goddesses, and those bent axis temples we only find in Mesopotamia. Then we can also see this on the technology. For example, maybe you know this is the shaduf for getting water, for example, out of a lake or out of the Nile in this situation. They introduced the shaduf. This shaduf was present since 3000 BC in Mesopotamia, but the Egyptians didn't know this. In Egyptian, this starts to occur around 1650 BC. And there's bronze and iron, the start of bronze and iron processing in Egypt. And why does this show that the Hyksos are from Mesopotamia? Because when we remember back about how the society in Egypt is built, agriculture has a very big standing because of working on Osiris' fields after his death. So before that, there was no industry. There was only agriculture dominant, the dominant industry in Egypt. But now, there starting to be some systematic industry in Egypt. This bronze and iron processing brought by the Hyksos into Egypt. This industry, this systematic industry of bronze processing, iron processing to build like weapons, this starts now in Egypt. And then in religion, we can also see the influence of the Hyksos. Because the main god until now was Amun-Ra, but Amun-Ra was not abolished, disposed. And they made Baal Zaphon. Baal Zaphon, we see from the name, this is also a Mesopotamic god. We see that he became the new god during the Hyksos rule in Egypt, the new main god. And we also see, when we look at later reports in the New Kingdom about the second intermediate period, this Baal Zaphon was, the Hyksos thought, Baal Zaphon is the same as Seth. And Seth killed Osiris, so Seth was really disliked by the Egyptians, and therefore this Baal god was also very disturbing for the Egyptians. We can read that in the reports that we find in the ruins. Also in the military, we have new weapons introduced that the Egyptians never knew of before. So we have the composite bow, and we have horses and chariots. So what we often see when we look at pictures from old ancient Egypt, this began in 1650. Earlier than that, the Egyptians only had infantry, soldiers, normal soldiers. But now, because of the Hyksos, they started to use the horses and the chariots when they went to war. So what was the influence and the legacy of the Hyksos? They were pretty military people. During this time, Egypt was a rather militaristic society, and military was everything in this society. So they never had an own culture or an own language. Of course, they had a language, but they adopted many Egyptian traditions, and also they took over some part of Egyptian culture and religion, but they changed central principles of the Egyptian culture. Additionally, they catched up the technical backlog of Egypt. The Middle Kingdom went down, lastly, not only because of political instability, but because it was so easy for the Hyksos with their weapons to invade Egypt. And this Egypt being technically in the technology behind the other countries, this was catched up in this period. And this was very important for the New Kingdom, because Egypt now catched up with all the weapons they had. They were now on the same level, and therefore the Egyptians could use these technological advancements to go against the Hyksos and expel the Hyksos and then establish the new kingdom. But why do we know so much about the Hyksos? Because they didn't have any writing culture. In the Egyptian kingdoms, the scribing culture, the scribes, they had a very important role. But the role of the scribes in the Hyksos time, they didn't exist there. But we know that much about the Hyksos rule in Egypt because of contemporary reports of ancient Egyptian people about the Hyksos, and because of the Egyptian thinking and reception of the Hyksos in the time of the New Kingdom. We are going to talk about that shortly.